Hey, I'm MMorris, and this is my presentation on HTTP and HTTPS service hardening for ISA4220. So to start off, we're going to get into a technical discussion on HTTP and HTTPS. The actual name for it is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and all websites are written in that today. When it comes down to it, the S on the end of HTTPS basically means that the website is secure. So with this online language, there has to be some software to help people write it. So there's a software called Apache. And this is actually a group of guys got together and they decided that the reason why they wanted to publish it was so that people could publish online websites and it would be available to everyone, not just businesses. And that's why they decided to make the software free for individuals to use. The group of people actually named themselves the Apache HTTP server project. That's what they gave the name to, Apache. And I already went over that it was free. It's available. It's a freely available source code implementation. Businesses are actually using it to experiment and have like a vanilla system, so they can go and mess around on it, so that they can check and see what they need to use to secure the website which they are using, or make sure the applications won't be hacked, or so that the systems won't be as vulnerable. A fact that I found is that Apache is the world's most widely used web server, and being that it's free, that helps a lot. It runs on almost every operating system, and this makes it easy for a user to download it and start working on a project. Now we're going to go into the next part of the technical discussion, which is over IIS, which actually is Microsoft's version of Apache, and that stands for Internet Information Server. The best thing about this is that it gives the users ability to create HTTP websites, gives them the possibility to create search engines, and helps with writing web-based applications. It's pretty popular in the world today, just like Apache. The one thing that is bad about IIS is that it must be purchased, and Apache's free, so someone who wants to buy something, or someone who wants to not purchase something, can go and get Apache. But if you want a couple other extra services, IIS is good, and it would be worth the purchase. One of the cool things about IIS is that it has active server page technology, which allows a user to control what can be implanted into the page and sent back to other users when a website is created. There is one more downside to IIS, which is that it's pretty vulnerable. So that leads into why we have best practices in hardening for the service. Going into some of the best practices, the first software we're going to talk about is Apache, and one of the things you're going to want to do is disable trace HTTP. The trace feature actually allows the hacker to see what modifications have been done to the server, and it also allows them to possibly be able to steal cookie information. Another thing you'll really want to do is you don't want to set the user to root, otherwise you could danger your whole system from being compromised. So you want to run the site as a separate user and group. By default, Apache runs as daemon or nobody, and that has to be changed. Another practice is pretty much like every security application and everything you need to use, is that to set it to deny all. It's just like how the Windows firewall is set by default. This makes it so that you're only allowing what to come in and what you want to come in. The last thing for Apache is to disable web distributed authoring and versioning. This makes it so someone can't upload and download files and work with them on a remote server. Getting into IIS, one of the first practices is to run on the domain controller, or make sure you back up everything, because if something were to be compromised, your whole system would go down with it. Another pretty common security practice is always keep antiviruses up to date so that everything's running on the most current version. When using applications, you want to implement the least privilege principle so that users cannot access things that they don't need. Every site that you create should have its own unique pool to it, so that you don't mix up others, and so that if one site gets compromised, they don't all go down, or 2 or 3 altogether. And then our final best practice with IIS would be using the extended protection feature. What this feature actually can do is help against phishing and man-in-the-middle attacks. Getting into some of the actual implementation of the best practices which I suggested. For Apache, for the HTTP trace method, you're going to need to go in and find trace enable, and it's normally set to on by default, but you need to go and change that to off. And while doing that, there is you can disable server signatures, and to do that you just do the same thing, find server signature and set that to off. And to do these, you actually will need root to access the root for Apache. By denying or turning off server signatures, you actually will make it so that the attacker cannot see what Apache version you are using, so that will help a little bit. The final implementation would be the deny all methodology. To do this, you actually have to go to the directory, and there will be a allow override that'll say none after it, and under that there will be order, and that will say deny, and you'll need to change that to allow. And then there will be another portion that will say deny from, and you need to change that to all, and that'll make it so that your server has deny all. This will actually make it so your server will deny everything, and then you can write the rules which you need after that. Getting into the implementation how-to of the IIS software is when running ISS on the domain controller, you have to make sure that it's not on the same computer as the web server. And when you do this, you have to actually make sure that there are no user accounts on the domain controller. If there are user accounts on the domain controller, or it's on the same computer as the web server, then you have a huge lack of security, because just like I said earlier, if one thing goes down, it all goes down. One of the cool features I was talking about earlier